I asked Richard Garriott, video game developer of the Ultima series. He went to the International Space Station not long ago, a couple years ago. He was up there for a couple weeks. The most amazing experience of his life. His dad was an astronaut, so he always wanted to be in the same position as his dad. He recreated some of his dad's experiments while on the International Space Station. So a second generation human being to have gone to the International Space Station. I believe the very first second generation ever. And it was a huge experience for him. And I asked Richard Garriott, I met him once. I wanted to ask him this question in person based on my poltergeist experiences in the past. And I never did because I forgot. I was there just to, as an Ultima Dragon of the UDIC at Disneyland at a Dragons convention, the very first ever. And he gave his talks, and then he talked and got pictures and signed his autograph. And he's a very nice guy in person. And I got a picture with him. And I forgot to ask him the question because he was very important to me. I forgot. So I tweeted him, and he responded. Richard Garriott responded to my tweet. I asked Richard Garriott, knowing that spirits follow people, knowing there's a demon on one shoulder, an angel on the other shoulder, not figuratively, literally. I know this to be a personal fact, but personal facts are hard to prove. Take it with a grain of salt if you don't want to believe it, because it's very unbelievable, or it's very easy to disbelieve is what I mean to say. I personally know it to be a fact. Anyway, these spirits are under certain guidelines. They can't show themselves, ever. The demon breaks the rules sometimes, though. Whereas the angel never breaks the rules. Angels are as obedient to their chain of command as it gets, to a T. They couldn't break the rules even if they wanted to. I asked Richard Garriott on Twitter. I said, hey, when you went up to the International Space Station, I want to ask you this question. Did you notice any creaks or bangs or unusual sounds? Sounds that I attribute to poltergeist activity that I've experienced many times firsthand. Knowing that a demon is following him and a guardian angel and everyone else on the space station. And Richard Garriott said, yes, an unusual sound I heard. It sounded like snow falling on the outside of the International Space Station. It sounded like snow. Very unusual sound. He said he reported it to the other astronauts on the International Space Station. And he said, what is this unusual sound outside? It's clearly not meteorites. What is it? And they said, it's nothing, no big deal. We hear that all the time. And he's like, okay. And so he said they didn't report it. They didn't write it down. They didn't even care. But in my personal opinion, believe me, disbelieve me, I think it's a possibility that was one or more of the demons assigned to one or more of those astronauts in the International Space Station crawling outside. Demons don't need oxygen to live. They can crawl outside the International Space Station. They can walk straight through the walls. But they're assigned to the humans, so they can't really leave the vicinity. They can't fly off to Saturn. They can't fly off to the moon or straight into the sun. They are bound by needing to be within a certain vicinity of us. So it's not literally on your shoulder. I don't know what the vicinity is, but if they're assigned to you, they have to keep a certain distance at all times from birth to death, both the demon and the guardian angel. But because they're in another dimension, saying 10 feet is probably not how it works. It's more being able to hear and see. How they hear and see might vary because they're in another dimension, looking down. But at the same time, the dimensions are stacked. And in my opinion, it's possible that poltergeist activity happens on the International Space Station because a demon assigned to every human was messing around on the outside, trying to freak people out. perhaps it's been doing it for years, concerning maybe a repeating, you know what I mean? An astronaut goes up, an astronaut goes down. Maybe the demons are like, hey, we play this game, we scratch the outside. They think it's like, sounds like snow falling on the outside walls of the metal station, and it's hilarious. Continue up, continue to do that. I would like to ask the same question to that astronaut who broke the record and was on the International Space Station for a year straight. His bones and his muscle mass clearly changed after a year, and actually I believe he had a twin, and so they judged his muscle mass and bones with his identical twin brother. That's why he was chosen for the experiment. Poltergeist activity follows you. Now, it follows me. At the same time, it doesn't show itself to too many people. 99% of humans will never experience poltergeist activity. Consider yourself lucky. I know it to be real. I know it to be authentic and legit. There's a guy named Roger Morneau, rest in peace. He experienced it for 6 months after he left a bad organization. He experienced it for 6 months, poltergeist activity. Objects levitating, being picked up off the walls, a painting. A lamp being picked up off the ground. Books being knocked out of his hands. And Carl Jung, the psychologist, psychiatrist, friend of Sigmund Freud, he experienced poltergeist activity too. And he tried to rationalize it away. I think Carl Jung was a prototype, was a beta test for negative entities, demons that have the ability to poltergeist, move objects, to see what the human psyche, and more specifically, what the human psychologist, the human skeptic, rational thinker, psychiatrist how they would perceive poltergeist activity. And Carl Jung fell right into the trap, rationalized it away as part of his mind. I disagree with Carl Jung 100%. It wasn't part of his mind. Rest in peace, Carl Jung, but he was wrong. He was so entrenched in the Freudian way of thinking, of just rationalizing everything you see and observe as coming from your mind, that he couldn't even grasp the concept of it being an external intelligent entity, which it was. External intelligent entities, they bother me on a regular basis ever since 2011. The major harassment, the major demonic oppression is over, but the revolving door continues to an extent. A creak on the wall of a house doesn't mean it's necessarily poltergeist activity, but it doesn't mean it's not. Most likely it's not going to be. But a full-blown knock, when you know there's no one there and nothing there, in my instance, in my case, full-blown poltergeist activity. So not everything you see on the show Ghost Adventures is fake. Some of it's real. I've experienced a lot of what they've experienced, and in 2011, I would say to an extreme degree, I experienced a condensed, super, ultra souped up, on steroids version of what they experienced in a 6-month period of time. And all I have to show for it is what I know. So like Carl Jung, I will write books on the subject, but unlike Carl Jung, I will come to a different conclusion, as I already have. No one can convince me it wasn't an intelligent external entity, because I was a roommate with the thing. I was a roommate with it for 6 months. When you have a roommate for 6 months, you do learn a lot about that roommate. As far as spiritual roommates, I had a legit spirit roommate. And it acted like a wild monkey, playing with stuff and knocking stuff over, almost with no rhyme or reason. But its rhyme and reason was more intelligent than it played on to be. Its rhyme and its reason was to demonically oppress and harass and terrorize me. These experiences are firsthand. They're real. It's not from a book. I didn't read about it. I'm not a fan of horror movies. I thank you for watching. Be seeing you.